In a way, I wish that The Producer was the last episode of the Debbie Reynolds Show. It's actually the penultimate episode, the 25th episode of the first and only season, and the final scene in this episode just would have been such a gorgeous finale. And I'll talk more about that with a spoiler warning and why I think that's the case. But of course, deep down, I am really glad that I still have one more episode to go. This one is all about a talent show that's supposed to be raising money um, for the children, and unfortunately, there are no acts. Well, there's one act, there's a clown act, and that's it. And initially, Charlotte asks Debbie if Jim will sing, and we get to hear Jim singing, and he has a gorgeous voice. Don Chastain has a beautiful singing voice. He does a wonderful rendition of Home on the Range. But a plan that Debbie had, and I won't spoil it too much, but a plan that Debbie had didn't work very well, and they're still at a loss. What on earth are they going to do if there are no acts? And I won't say just now what happens, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it because initially I thought this would be one of those episodes where Debbie gets to perform. Something I've mentioned multiple times is that my favourite episodes of The Debbie Reynolds Show are the ones where Debbie Reynolds gets to put on a performance. She's an amazing performer, always love watching her. I'm not a fan of physical comedy in general. It's one of the reasons why I don't really like clowns that much. I'm kind of scared of them. But Debbie Reynolds, when she gets a chance to perform physically, and that's both in terms of using her body for comedy and her facial expressions, I love it. I find her so mesmerizing, and the episodes of the Debbie Reynolds Show where she gets to perform a lot are the ones I love the most. And this episode does give us a bit of that. It started off with her doing a small tap dancing routine around the kitchen table. Absolutely loved it. And then things took a very interesting direction. This is a wonderful episode, very fun, so many great performances. We also have Tom Bosley, giving a really great performance of this song he keeps repeatedly singing. And actually, I find that Bob is not often the source of a lot of comedy. I find that actually often the comedy is bouncing off of him. That's usually his position in the show, which is a brilliant role to have still. But with this one, he got a chance to really show how great he can be with comedic timing and this wonderful performance. And honestly, I think he should have been allowed to sing in the production. I liked listening to him singing. But that's not the direction things took. The direction things did take were wonderful. So I'll explain now, with of course a big spoiler warning, for what the final scene is and why I personally think it could have been a really beautiful emotional final scene. I don't know what the final scene is actually like. I will watch that episode next week and find out. Slightly heartbroken that this is the penultimate episode. But the final scene, at the end of the episode, we actually get to see this clown act. And we have two clowns, and then Debbie dressed as a clown, and she looks wonderful, and her performance is just amazing. They're swinging her upside down. She's throwing herself all over the place. Vocally, the performance is brilliant. The costumes are incredible, and I just loved it. I don't like clowns, but I absolutely loved her performance. I will say the performance lasted a little bit longer than I think it should have done. I don't know how long it was, but it must have been a good 3 or 4 minutes. Because I love Debbie, I loved watching every second of it, but thinking, critically, with a slightly more subjective attitude, I think it was longer than it needed to be, but I still enjoyed all of it. And it was just everything that Debbie Reynolds is as a performer. She loved to make people laugh. This was one of her favorite kinds of performances to do, and from a teenager before she was discovered, when she was still Mary Frances, she used to put on these kinds of performances, usually where she'd kind of lip sync to tracks and do these comedic performances, physical comedy. And it's just everything that Debbie Reynolds was as a performer. And it was beautifully done, very engaging. And I got a little bit emotional. And I think it would have been a perfect way to end the Debbie Reynolds Show. But of course, I haven't seen the final episode yet, so I don't know. Maybe the next episode has a glorious ending. I also don't know if it's written as a final episode, because obviously when you start a sitcom, you don't necessarily go into it thinking your last episode of the first season will be your last ever episode. But we'll see how it goes. But for now, as a penultimate episode, I thought The Producer was gorgeous. So many amazing performances, and that final scene, just as I said, I got emotional. I welled up quite a bit watching it. If you're a fan of Debbie Reynolds, I think you'll really thoroughly enjoy it. Definitely a really beautiful episode.